So a second news story that I think will end up being pretty big, we'll have to see, but it has that feel to it, involves this security guard at a Kroger's. This was actually at a Kroger's gas station, so just outside the Kroger's. Most of you, Kroger's, if you don't know, depending on your region of the country, it's a large supermarket chain, lots of differently named stores under the umbrella of Kroger's as well. We have here in Colorado, we have, I believe, our local King Soopers is part of the Kroger empire. I believe Safeway is part of the Kroger empire. I could be wrong on that. I don't claim any expertise in supermarket corporations, but I believe that's the case. Kroger's very, very large supermarket chain. And this event occurred where there was they had an apparently armed security guard, which I found kind of surprising. But this event did take place in Memphis, Tennessee, folks. Houston's got nothing on Memphis, Tennessee when it comes to violent crime. I mean, Memphis has been an unbelievably violent city, well, since I was a child, so for decades, for sure. And I certainly doubt it's getting any safer in the intervening years, decades. But they had an armed security guard at this outside at the gas station, and the security guard got into a confrontation with a black male there at the gas station. Now, this happened last August, but it's in the news today because they just released video of this event. They had what appears to be a probable cause hearing in which the prosecution showed the video inside the courtroom. It was recorded by, I presume, news media cameras there. So the video of the event apparently has just been released in the last week or so. So somebody saw it, brought it to my attention. Now I've seen it. And again, I'll be sharing, I'm not embedding the video here for reasons I've already explained, because of how Facebook and YouTube treat my channel when I do that. But I will, of course, put the video on the Law of Self-Defense members page when we write about this case. But I'll describe the video. So we have this security guard. His name is Gregory Livingston. He's a 54-year-old security guard. He's a white male. They say he's a former police officer, but it looks like his police duties only lasted for 2.5 years. Ended in 2001. So this, if he was a cop, it was very briefly and more than 20 years ago. He was still, he was only about 34 years old when he stopped being a police officer. 54 years old now. And the man who was shot is a black male, Alvin Motley, who's described as blind. His family says he was blind. He could only see shadows, which I think is going to prove to be an interesting part of this narrative. And what the video shows is you can see the security guard, Livingston, off to the right side of the screen. He's got his handgun out, two-handed position, a shooting stance. Looks like a pretty good shooting stance. He looks steady to me, like he knows what he's doing. He's got the gun pointed at Alvin Motley, the black male. Alvin Motley is closing on him. So Livingston is standing still. Motley is advancing on the gun in Livingston's hands. Motley has apparently a beer can in his left hand and a lit cigarette in his right hand. And keep in mind, folks, there's gas pumps maybe 10 feet away. So this is happening at a gas station. He's got a lit cigarette in his hand. Motley does. And Motley advances on Livingston, who is standing still, until the point where Motley's advanced to about within 6 feet of Livingston, and then Livingston fires a single shot into Motley's chest, killing him. And Livingston has now, of course, been charged with second-degree murder. I shouldn't say of course, but he has been charged with second-degree murder over this shooting. That was what the probable cause hearing was about when they showed the video. And it won't surprise anyone that now there's a civil suit in this case as well. And it won't surprise anyone that the lead counsel in the civil suit is attorney Benjamin Crump, who we've been familiar with ever since the George Zimmerman days. Crump is often involved in these civil suits. He's never been a prosecutor, to my knowledge, so he's a civil litigator. And of course, they're going to sue Livingston, but Livingston isn't really important in the civil suit. He just has to be named as a party. What they really want to sue, of course, is Kroger, because Kroger has all the money. Kroger has the deep pockets. And we can see, as Crump has become so skilled at doing, that Crump is building his narrative of this as a racially motivated shooting. They're characterizing it as the security guard Livingston shot Motley because Motley was playing music too loud. Is that true? Is that why? I mean, was Motley just sitting in his car listening to loud music and Livingston walked up and shot him in the head? That's not what happened. But of course, what really happened and what the narrative says happened, it's frequently two completely different things. They were also saying that Motley was blind. His family says he was blind. He could only see shadows. Well, folks, first of all, when you see Motley advancing on Livingston, he's not advancing in a manner that anyone would characterize as being that of a blind person. He's advancing on Motley in a manner that would be consistent with having completely perfect eyesight. Second of all, it doesn't matter to the justification of Livingston's use of force that Motley was blind. First of all, Livingston would know this, that Motley had some kind of impaired vision. Second of all, Livingston's entitled to defend himself against the reasonably apparent threat. Excuse me. Now, I don't know what Livingston's version of these events is going to be. Presumably, it will be something like, hey, I saw this guy doing something that made me get my gun out. Remember, when the video opens, the selected portion of the video that we saw in court, Livingston already has his gun out. So surely he doesn't walk around Kroger's with a gun in his hand in his duties as a security guard. Something prompted him to present his gun. Was that really loud music? Is that what we're supposed to believe? Was it really because Motley is a black man? That's why Livingston pulled his gun? I doubt it. I suspect something more happened, that there was some stimulus from Motley that induced Livingston to present his gun. Now, whether that stimulus was legally sufficient to justify pulling a gun is a different question, but I doubt the stimulus was loud music or the fact that Motley was a black male. I expect that Kroger gas station had seen its share of loud music and black males before without Livingston ever having pulled his gun and pointed it at someone. So I expect there's more than what we've heard, certainly in the useless news media, to explain why Livingston already has his gun out, the muzzle on Motley. But once that's happened, now Motley's advancing on a gun. It's a deadly force fight, folks. When an aggressor is advancing on someone with a gun, the reasonable presumption has to be that the aggressor is not in fear of the gun. They believe that the gun cannot be used to harm them, presumably because they can seize control of the gun. And that's why Livingston fired the shot. Again, I know very few of the facts and haven't heard both sides of the story, but based on my modest experience in these kinds of cases, that's what I expect to have happen. Of course, all Benjamin Crump really cares about is the money. So he wants to get and most of the time, Benjamin Crump only rarely goes to court. In fact, I'm not sure he's ever gone to court. He makes his money in these cases because he gets settlements. He induces people. He targets cases where there's somebody who can be made to feel political heat, can be made to feel the heat of being called a racist, and can make that pain and heat go away by spending other people's money. Now, often in these cases, the people made to feel the heat are the local city or town or police department, whoever is in charge of the department that employed the officer who used force in that particular case, because Benjamin Crump often gets involved in police use of force cases. So the police have shot a suspect. Usually it's a white officer and a black suspect. Crump feels he can characterize this as a shooting out of racial animus. He makes that argument to the media. The media is happy to run with it. The local jurisdiction feels the heat of being called racist, and they have the ability to spend other people's money, taxpayer money, to make their pain go away. And they do. And they'll give Crump $10, $20, $30 million to make their pain go away. $30 million of other people's money. It's a very efficient revenue-generating machine that Attorney Crump has built for himself. I have to give him that. Certainly, my mom would tell me I went into the wrong area of the law, because I can assure you, law of self-defense is not making money tens of millions of dollars at a time simply for asking for it, without even having to go to court or provide legal services. But in any case, that's Crump's model. In this case, of course, he's targeting Kroger, their management. They won't be spending their personal money. They won't be writing any personal checks to Benjamin Crump. They'll be spending Kroger money, essentially shareholder money, to make Crump go away, to make this political heat go away, these arguments that Kroger employs racists as security officers, racists who, through pure racial animus, will gun down black male customers in their stores for no other reason than loud music. If he can make the Kroger management feel that pain, Kroger management I think it's a reasonable expectation based on past performance, will be willing to give Benjamin Crump 10 or 20 or $30 million, a third of which goes directly into Crump's pocket, to make that pain go away. And if you're wondering why Kroger would just hand away, who knows, maybe $30 million, the George Floyd settlement to Benjamin Crump was $27 million. So certainly it's within the realm of possibility. If you're wondering why Kroger would do that, it's because $30 million, well, it doesn't mean anything to them. It's pocket change to them. Kroger's revenues last year, folks, were on the order of I made a note here to myself, $70 billion. If your revenues are $70 billion, you can afford $30 million to make being called a racist go away. And that's, of course, what I expect to happen in this case. Now, separately, of course, Livingston is being criminally charged as well, charged with second-degree murder, as I mentioned. That's what this probable cause hearing was about. And again, I haven't seen enough of this case to have a solid sense of where the legal merits are. I mean, certainly I see an argument for self-defense to be made just based on that video. The black male who was shot was advancing into the muzzle of Livingston's gun. That's an act of aggression. So I can readily see a self-defense argument there to be made. I want to hear both sides' stories before I could develop a solid sense of how robust that self-defense justification was. But certainly there's enough to allow a self-defense. He's made that burden of production, that prima facie case for self-defense that would be required to be able to argue self-defense at trial. Certainly that is there. But one question, of course, we have to ask ourselves is if this case is racially energized, as it certainly will be now that Crump is involved, at least in the civil side of things, if it's racially energized, does anyone believe there's any possibility that Gregory Livingston can get a fair and impartial jury in a racially energized case, a white man shooting a black man in Memphis, Tennessee? Does anybody think that can happen? A fair and impartial jury to argue or consider the actual legal merits of the case? I don't know. Doesn't seem likely to me. Also, circling back to the civil case, we're also hearing that, of course, that Motley, the man who was shot, was an aspiring actor. This is from Motley's sister, of course, who presumably stands to benefit from a wrongful death suit of the kind that Crump is bringing. Motley, the man who was shot, was an aspiring actor, entertainer, and media personality who was filming a reality show. In case you've never heard of Motley, and of course, he also had his own clothing business. So why do these things matter? Well, they matter for the civil suit because they go to damages. So the more value that was lost through the purported wrongful death of Motley, the greater the settlement is going to be from Kroger, and the more money that Benjamin Crump and, of course, Motley's surviving sister will get.